Welcome to Alt Swift, incarnation of Alt Swift X. And I put a lot of thought. I put a lot of thought into what this should be, what the next iteration of this series should be, and the thought, that was the mistake. That was the error. Was all the thoughts. Because aren't thoughts just barriers that we put in the way of our us achieving our aspirations? Isn't that's what my guru was telling me the other day. He was like, Swift, you think too much, and then your brain starts to swell up with citrus like one of Doran's fucking pomegranates. No, it was an orange. It was an orange, wasn't it? That splats onto the stone of the water garden because Doran, he thought about it too much. But we're not gonna think anymore. We're gonna do Alt Swift X the way it began, which was without forethought, without planning, just with a book and a drink and a dream in your heart, you know, the classic a Swift of, all right, so this one's called ACOK. The last one was called Agate. This one's called ACOK. We're not doing Game of Thrones Abridged anymore. We're doing a Clash of Kings Abridged. ACOK Abridged. ACOK Abridged, which sounds like a mythical, some kind of mythical creature, like my cousin was slain by a cock abridged. He was cleft in twain by a cock abridged. But it's all right. It's good. My cousin died at the Cockabridge's hands, but we shall not. We shall face the Cockabridge with courage and good heart, and we'll have a good time. Well, will we though? Because this prologue's a bit dark, actually. It's a bit sad. There's a lot of old men brooding on their legacy. There's a lot of fire witches. There's an inordinate number of drown victim brain damaged singing jester eldritch folk, just one of which is considered inordinately high, I would say. But that's all right. We'll work out what's going on. We'll figure out what it means, and it's going to be a good time. So we begin the prologue of A Clash of Kings with a comet's tail spreading across the dawn, a red slash bleeding above the crags of Dragonstone like a wound in the purple-pink sky. Which right away, like, as far as omens go, it's not really a good one, is it? Omens range from the very positive to the very negative, I would say. Like, if you're getting some kind of a golden chocolate mousse delivered to your doorstep of a morn that spells out the letters, "Have a great day, friend," I'd say that's a positive omen. This one, in comparison, involves wounds and slashes and bleeding. It's bloody, so I would say this is a relatively poor omen. I would not be buying lottery cards or even crossing the road after an omen such as this. If I got an omen such as a bloody red comet in the sky, I would be staying inside, wrapped in bubble wrap up to my chin, just sitting in the closet with a crucifix and a Quran just to be safe, and whatever other regalia I can find, and just hoping that nothing comes and hurts me. And then ironically, I would suffocate in said closet, because that's George Martin's message about prophecy, isn't it? You shouldn't try and outsmart the prophecy, or you'll just tangle yourself over and shank yourself in the back. Magic's a saucy sword with no handle, isn't that That's what Marwyn said. But anyway, so we're on this island called Dragonstone, and there's a red comet above, and our protagonist, our stalwart protagonist, is a maester, an old man by the name of Crescent, and he's surrounded by stone gargoyles that are 12 feet tall. Because George Martin always did have a thing about scale, didn't he? He likes things big. He's a bit of a size queen, is George Martin. George Martin is a size queen. If it's not big and turgid and girthy, George Martin's not interested, you see, because he likes his walls 600 feet tall. He likes his storm's ends to have 16 layers of granite 14 feet wide, and his gargoyles are 12 foot tall. And there's 1,000 of them. There are 1,000 12-foot gargoyles, which is a lot of stone. Awful lot of... And so Crescent's standing amongst the gargoyles. There's a hellhound and a werven. And Dragonstone is cool because instead of crenellations, which are the knobbly bits on the castle wall, the bits that protect the archers from the archery sticks, what are they? Arrows. They call them arrows. Instead of crenellations just being like stone Lego teeth, they're gargoyles. They're stone folks, wervens and hellhounds sitting about, which you'd think would be perhaps less effective than just a stone block. I mean, I'll admit the stone block Lego crenellations, what they lack in creativity, they do make up for in utility, do they not? I mean, if you want to block a thing, use a block. That's why they call it a block of stone, right? A big square of stuff. It's voluminous, you know? Whereas if you've got a werven or a bloody hellhound, what if an arrow whizzed over the hellhound's shoulder or wiggled its way between the werven's talons or something? I don't know what these guys are shaped like, but I presume... Look, maybe we're overthinking it, and let's not be Doran Martell about it. The point is that there's 1,000 stone gargoyles being crenellations here, and I think that's exciting. I'm excited. And Crescent thinks of these gargoyles as old friends. He thinks if only these stone tongues could speak. And the fact that this old man is hanging out with these gargoyles and wishing that they could speak with him, thinking of them as friends. Are you not reminded of the animated Hunchback Disney movie? Remember how there's that asymmetrical ass hunchback lurking about the top of... which church? It's a specific church, isn't it? Can someone in the chat tell me which church the hunchback... Oh, it's the fucking Notre Dame, isn't it? Yeah, that one was obvious. It's in the name. Probably should have worked that one out. Put one and one together. It is the Notre Dame. Dame. That's the one. All right. Thanks for clearing that one up. The Hunchback of Notre Dame hangs out on the titular Notre Dame church, amongst the gargoyles, amongst the stony fellows, and he makes friends with them, and they sing all these songs and they dance about, and the hunchback shares his feelings with the gargoyles. But then the really incredibly depressing reality of that situation, insofar as there is a reality, is that this hunchback is just so lonely and delusional that he's talking to inanimate rocks. And it's and thinking that they're talking back, and I feel like Crescent is channeling the hunchback in that respect, and talking to rocks. A gargoyle is no near as good as a hello rock. If you are feeling lonesome, the solution is not talking to gargoyles. The solution is to toss a hello rock at the nearest Schwiftite you can find. That's my suggestion. But anyway, so Crescent's hanging out with the rock fellows, and he's brooding on this comet, on this red wound scar, bleeding tail across the sky, and he's thinking, man, this might be a bad omen. It's the color of blood and flame and sunsets he has never seen its like. The Maester says, well, I don't believe in omens. I don't believe in magic and prophecy, because I'm a learned man. I'm a Maester. I know what's what. I don't believe in omens. And yet, Crescent says, maybe there is something behind magic, which is very reminiscent actually of Marwyn the Mage's speech. Remember when Marwyn talks about prophecy, and he's like, "Oh, prophecies! They'll bite your cock off, and they'll diddle your bunghole, and they'll defrock you and chuck you in a creek. That's what magic will do to you," says Marwyn in a feast of clash. Have we only got mono sound? We can probably fix that, actually. So I think OBS is interpreting it as a mono when it's actually a stereo or something like advanced audio. Can someone confirm whether we're in mono or stereo? Because we should be able to fix this, actually. Let me see. Maybe this will do it. Alright, I changed something, maybe that'll fix it. Let me know if that But, so Crescent is like, magic, poo-poo, no such thing as that. But then again, wow, this sure is spooky. So he's a bit concerned about that. But also we start to look at what's going on with Crescent personally at this point. He says that I'm an old done man. He's feeling his age. He has a lifetime of hard-won wisdom, and he's so invested in the secular state of things that he's a bit disturbed by the whole magic situation. Is it's fixed? Have we got stereo? Can we confirm? All right, it sounds like stereo. Great. All right, we'll continue with that. So he's all like, magic? Nah, mate. No magic here. But he's like, well, look, I'm pretty invested in this whole material, non-magical reality at this point. A lifetime of hard-won wisdom, he says. Sunk costs, you know that term? When you've invested all this time into something that you can't go and do something else because your costs are sunk. His knowledge is sunk into the idea of there being no magic, and so he's upset by the magic, is what we're trying to say. Page 2. And so he's a maester. Crescent is a maester. He was trained at the great citadel of Old Town. He's an academic. He's a scholar, a gentleman, and a scholar. And he's a man of knowledge. And so his status as a man of knowledge is upset by this comet in the sky. He thinks about the white raven that recently arrived, which signals the arrival of winter. We live in a uncertain world in Westeros where seasons last years of indeterminate length. I mean, it's not the years that are of indeterminate length, it's the seasons that are of indeterminate, and they're made up of, you know how this works. I don't need to, and he's like, what does it all mean? What's going on? What's the truth? Who is me? What does it all mean? And you ever hear of a bloke called Erickson? He was he German? There was a psychologist who had Erickson's psychosocial stages, where he says that, like, everyone's life goes through a series of stages that are defined by your age. So when you're born, it's about, like, trust. Like, is my mother gonna look after me, or is she a metal rhesus monkey who won't who can I trust? And then it moves up to like, can I be industrious? Can I achieve things on my own independently? And that's when you're like a young kid. And then like when in your teenage years, it's like identity versus like not knowing who the fuck you are. And Erikson says that everyone goes through these stages of life. And Cresson, who's like 80, his psychosocial stage, according to Erikson, is generativity. And it's about like trying to think about his legacy and has my life been a good one? Am I at peace with the impact I've had at the world? Can I die happy and satisfied, or am I disappointed with who I am? That, according to Erikson, is what Cresson should be working out. And I think that's what he reflects on in this chapter. This is about Cresson trying to come to terms with his legacy, and we learn that he is not entirely satisfied with his legacy, and in this chapter he hopes to repair it and change it for the better. And so he's having all these thoughts, and then he's interrupted by another man, a younger man called Pylos. And when he's interrupted, Cresson thinks, "Oh, what drivel I was thinking! What nonsense!" Which comes off as harsh, I would say. Like, all Cresson was doing was sort of meditating on, he himself and his place in the world and what this magic nonsense is about. But he thinks of it as drivel. So is he being harsh on himself? But I think this also reflects the philosophy of the Maesters, right? The Maesters of the Citadel have a very limited, restricted view of the world in some ways. They know more than anyone in certain ways. They're academics, but they also magical sunk costs is what that is. Oh god. YouTube says that the stream is... Actually, I've got a multi-dimensional pen color coding system within my pocket protector. This is a jumbo pocket protector, and it contains the full color wheel. Actually, it's a cylindrical formation of all my pens in all the different colors, representing the full visible color spectrum. I also have a secret ultraviolet pen, just sort of clinging to the outside there. But apart from, I'm a very orderly young man who likes things to be man, we really just went back into the old man voice, didn't we? Pylos is not... He's not that. Pylos is a young man. He's a young man who's very particular about the correct arrangement of pens. So anyway, which voice are we using? So the princess would like to see the raven. And the princess is Shireen Baratheon, daughter of King Stannis Baratheon. He's recently decided that he's the king because of the death of King Robert. Robert is the elder brother of Stannis, or he was the elder brother. Now he's dead. Still elder, no longer alive. Is at issue here, and that's the reason why Stannis now considers himself king, and why Shireen is now the princess. Which, sidebar, if anyone actually did decide to recognize Stannis as king, and Shireen was the princess, that would mean, presumably, that if Stannis died, Shireen would become queen of the Seven Kingdoms, which would be unprecedented. There has never been a queen of the Seven Kingdoms, unless you watched that fan fiction called HBO's Game of Thrones. There's never been a queen of Westeros, so wouldn't it be fascinating if Shireen tried to succeed the Iron Throne? It's hard to imagine tiny little shy Shireen sitting on that great iron beast. But Pylos is saying she'd like to see the raven. And so Cresson's like, oh yeah, mate, we'll have a look at the birdie that symbolizes the winter. And yes, Cresson talks about how he's old and he's shattered a hip and he's frail, and it sucks. Don't age is my advice. Actually, don't age. It'll only slow you down. And ironically speed you up at the same time, which is the really upsetting thing. Your gait slows, but the pace, chronically, yeah. All right. We have a comment from Dredrick saying that when Shireen was born, she contracted grayscale from a Targaryen named Joe Targaryen, who has a sonic sonar that's an armadillo. Thank you, Dredrick, for your contribution. And further, so we're talking about Shireen, and Crescent gets Pylos to go and fetch the princess so that she can see the birdie. And so Crescent hurries Pylos along to fetch the princess, making a feeble gesture of haste from a man no longer capable of hastening. Which is a nice little ironic line. Crescent is telling someone to hurry up when Crescent himself is not very good at hurrying up anymore. It's like Stannis. It's like that line about Stannis when Stannis is like, "I am not without mercy," thundered he who is notoriously without mercy. That that voice kind of hurts. So Pylos goes off to fetch the princess. And Crescent remains. And eventually, Crescent meets the princess brought by Pylos, and the princess is shy and with guileless blue eyes. She's young and but she's not pretty. Alas, Crescent thinks. The child has Stannis's square jaw and Selyse's unfortunate ears. Selyse Florent has rather sort of flappy, Dumbo-like elephantine ears, and Shireen has those, and she also has crackly grey skin as a result of grayscale that she had as a kid, that left her skin cracked and flaking and grey, which is sad. But there's another one who comes in with Princess Shireen, a gentleman, an upstanding gentleman by the name of Patchface. He walks, well, he doesn't walk, he shuffles and hops in a queer sideways fashion. And here's a fan theory for you. Patchface walks sideways. You know who else walks sideways? Crab people. Crabs walk sideways. So given the available evidence, I think we can conclude that Patchface is a crab wearing human skin. So he's probably out to nip you when you least expect it, is Patchface. But yes, no, Patchface is really upsetting, actually. Patchface is disturbing. Because Patchface is mentally incapacitated to some degree, and he's like a jester. He's like a jester, or like a court fool, or whatever the term is. And he wears a hat on his head that's got bells on it. If you like it, then you better put a bell. No, don't do that. And it makes a cling-a-clang, bong-a-ding, ding-dang-dong, because it's covered in bells. And as we are soon going to see, Patchface is constantly saying just bizarre shit that's upsetting. And thank you for the satanic, numerically satanic tip from Nose Kills. Anyone know how to use the super chat, he asks? Well, he does. So that's ironic. Real meta of you, Nose Kills. I appreciate that. And so Patchface is weird and upsetting. Shireen is nice but ugly. And they've come to see the birdie. And so Crescent says, "Yeah, I'll show you the birdie." And he feels sympathy for Shireen. He thinks that Shireen has been denied too often in her time. She is sad, the saddest child that Crescent has ever known, and Crescent feels guilt for Shireen's sadness. That's one of the recurring themes of this chapter, is that Crescent is unsatisfied with his legacy. He feels responsible for the sadness and dysfunction of some of the people around him, and he hopes to repair some of that. And so, yeah, another mark of my failure, he thinks. And yeah, Shireen is 10. And whenever ages are mentioned, I wonder about the 5-year gap. You know, George Martin's infamous 5-year gap where it was originally planned when he was writing the early books that he would leave a gap between the third and fourth books of 5 years, not 5 years in our world, 5 years in Westeros, so that the characters in the story would age up. Rickon would not be riding around on a unicorn at the tender age of 4 or whatever he is. He would be 9 because 5 years would be added on to the story. I wonder what 15-year-old Shireen would be. I wonder how different her fate would be when she's older. I wonder if she'd have a better go on the Iron Throne if she was 15. But alas, she may not ever reach 15, given that we know what happens in the show. Dredrick says that Shireen is actually George R. R. Martin's fursona. He's a scaly, and he made Shireen on his DeviantArt account as his scale sona. Dredrick, you're on fire. I think you're onto something there. Next time you see one of them at a convention, it might be George Martin under the suit. And so Pylos is like, yeah, I'll help you go and see the birdie. And we have a reflection on how grim Dragonstone is. It's a grim place, a lonely citadel in the wet waste. It's a rocky island. It's surrounded by storm and salt and the smoking shadow of the mountain. Salt and smoke, you say? Is there some prophecy, maybe, that might have something to say about salt and smoke? Some kind of Azor Ahai that would be born on this island. Almost as though Daenerys was born on this island. As though that might mean something. Who knows? But Dragonstone is sort of a gross place, and Crescent never quite felt at home here. Perhaps only Targaryens can ever really feel home on Dragonstone. It was created by the Targaryens. It was inhabited by the Targaryens for centuries. Centuries? Long time. And Crescent feels uneasy here. Crescent feels uneasy in so many ways about his life. And then we have Patchface deliver one of his classic Patchface-isms. He says, under the sea. No, what kind of a voice does Patchface... Something upsetting. Under the sea. The birds. No, I don't know what Patchface sounds like, but he says, under the sea, the birds have scales for feathers. I know. Oh. Well, it's sing-song, isn't it? Patchface says this sort of sing-song thing about birds and feathers and scales and seas, and he says these things all the time throughout this chapter and others, and it's just weird and upsetting and salty and squishy. It's like Hairless Oyster, our good friend, who I think I saw in the chat. Welcome all, by the way. I'm not going to try and shout out everyone who's here, because that would take the whole duration of the stream, but welcome all. And so Patchface says something upsetting. And we have Crescent reflect on Patchface's well-being. So as we learn later, Patchface was involved in a shipwreck, and he was lost in the shipwreck for several days until he washed up at shore, where he seemed dead at first, but then he was alive, sort of. Alive, but broken. The sea had taken his wits and his memory. He's now subject to twitches and trembles, incoherent. So it sounds like he's suffering from fucking brain damage or something. I don't know what the technical term is. I don't think there's anything in the DSM that explains when you start rambling eldritch shit what that means. I don't know. Would Patchface be creepier with a deep voice or a high-pitched voice? We will find out, Emily Crocker. We will work it out. Jim DC asks why so many people read so much into Patchface. Because he talks about the fucking dark and the ocean and the Lovecraft and the Cthulhu. Euron is about to pull some Patchfacian horror out of the sea, no doubt. And he just adds so much to the spooky Halloween tone of, like, we're gonna be eaten by tuna if we don't eat the tuna. It's a dog eat dog, tuna eat man world, and that's what Patchface represents, I think. Hairless Oyster suggests that Patchface is suffering from a touch of being dead. Yes, maybe Patchface is dead. Like Melisandre is sort of a bit dead, isn't she? Well, there's Beric, John. There's lots of characters in this show who are like maybe dead, which is always an upsetting. Real, like you hate to be halfway through a night with someone only to find out that, oh boy, you're a corpse. I should have suspected. It was the formaldehyde that did it. You ever read American Gods? Corpses, they're nothing but trouble. I don't want to seem discriminatory. I don't want to seem bigoted. But corpses, would not recommend. Would not recommend. Dredgerick is waxing lyrical about the resurrectional properties of tuna. That plausible. I would say plausible. And so Patchface is talking some mad shit. And Shireen has been having some bad dreams about dragons that are coming to eat you. And I swear to God, if you hang out with Patchface all the time, as Shireen does, you're going to have some nasty, bloody dreams. Although she doesn't have fishy, salty dreams so much as fiery, draconic dreams, which is interesting. And so Maester Crescen's like, so here's the other thing. Dragonstone, the castle, the island is carved in the shape of dragons. This is a massive, again, George Martin is a size queen. This is a implausibly gigantic castle with all of these thousands of gargoyle crenellations and these towers that are in the form of carved dragons, and Shireen seems to be concerned that these dragons might come to life and eat her, which actually refers to one of the prophecies that is a thing later on, the idea that Azor Ahai will wake dragons from stone, which is not yet happened, actually. I think I have a suspicion. Do you think that maybe the waking stone dragons thing might be retconned by George Martin? I feel like George Martin's eyes were bigger than his belly, and his belly is quite large. Not to body shame poor George, but I think he might have been overambitious at the particular literary buffet that he was writing when he added quite so many prophecies and plot points. Are we going to get a resolution to every single plot point and every single obscure prophecy? Will dragons wake from stone? I don't know. It depends whether George Martin can stomach quite that much writing, and currently he seems to be more than satiated, I would say. And so the Valyrians raised this citadel, Crescent explains. They shaped the stone with methods not known to us. The Valyrians were magical. And Crescent assures Shireen that the dragons are just stone and they will not come to life. Don't worry. And of course, whenever some kind of material, secular type tells you that don't worry, this magic thing won't get you, you know for a certainty that magic thing will be doing some getting quite soon. This chapter is, among other things, an ideological struggle between secularism and magic, and as is fairly regularly the case in fantasy novels, spoiler, secularism does not win. And so Shireen is also concerned about the comet in the sky, and she's worried that it's dragon's breath and that dragons are coming. But Crescent thinks, no, mate, there's no bloody dragons. Don't worry, it's just a star without a tail, with a tail, lost in the heavens. It's just a rock. It's not gonna kill you. And then it'll be hilarious. Some people have suggested that the ending of Game of Thrones is going to be the comet, this comet physically smashing into Earth or Globeros or Westerworld or whatever the fuck we're calling it, and will just kill everybody at the end of the series, which as that buffet table creaks and George Martin gets as aged as Crescent, maybe the nuclear option of asteroidation might be the might become an appealing option for George. I hope not. And so Crescent's like, don't worry about space rocks or dragons. It's gonna be okay, mate. Although, of course, ironically, Crescent is at least as concerned about this stuff as Shireen is. And so Shireen gives a brave little nod. And Crescent feels uncomfortable. The chain about his neck is heavy, and of course the chain of a maester is forged of metals of different types, symbolizing different kinds of knowledge. And the conclave has met. The conclave is the body that gets together and decides when to send the White Raven. The conclave looks at all these measurements and reports by maesters all over the realm, all the maester weather balloons and satellites, all the data. They're like NASA. The Citadel is like Westeros NASA, and they crunch the numbers and they go, all right, this is our best guess of when winter is coming, and then the conclave decides to send the White Raven, which is a funny contrast to the papal conclave, isn't it? The papal conclave are the bunch of Italian men. They're not all Italian. They are all Catholics, Christians, Catholics. They're all Catholics in the conclave, and they decide who the new pope is going to be. And I think that's a funny contrast between the secular conclave of the maesters, who make their decision via reports and measurements about the seasons, compared to the Catholic Vatican papal conclave who make the new pope, who make their decision based on, I presume, the whisperings of Yahweh or some such. I wouldn't deign to know what the conclave is up to. Perhaps I'd rather not. Or maybe I'm being like Crescent about it. Maybe I should be open-minded to the conclave, but not too open-minded, or they'll get. All right, let's not go down that road. Catholics beside. The Crescent talks about how, well, look, if the gods are good, summer will come again soon. The winter will only be short. And spoiler, it seems that in this world the gods are not terribly good. If the title The Winds of Winter is any indication, we may be in for a long and dark winter. This is one of Hairless Oyster's favorite chapters, because of the citadels, ravens, undead, lackwits, fire magic, Catholics, shaped stone hip injuries. Big fan of hip injuries is Hairless Oyster. Nice. And oh god, there are a lot of pages in this chapter, aren't there? We're starting to notice how many goddamn pages there are. We'll pick up the pace lest Swift loses his reputation for brevity. And so Patchface says some more creepy shit. He says that it's always summer under the sea. The merwives wear ninny moans in their hair and weave gowns of silver seaweed. That's not at all his voice. I know, oh. That's also not his voice. We can't do a Patchface voice. But Shireen giggles at Patchface. Shireen is apparently the one person who likes Patchface, and presumably that's the only reason why he's still hanging about. It's amazing how tolerant the people of Dragonstone are of Patchface, given how creepy, not to mention noisy, Patchface is, what with the bells on his helmet, his tin helmet. Can you imagine how fucking annoying it would be having Patchface prance about your hallways ding-dong-dalling and fucking singing about the necrotic Cthulhu Lovecraftian underwater dead? God damn. So yeah, there's that. And so he sings and let's turn another page. The Raven talks. It's impressive that the Raven can talk. It's a clever bird, Patchface says. You're a clever man, and I'm a clever, clever fool. And then Patchface belts out one of his classics, one of like the top 10 greatest hits of Patchface. Includes this gem, which goes thusly. The shadows come to dance, my lord, dance, my lord, dance, my lord. The shadows come to stay, my lord, stay, my lord, stay, my lord. And he says that a lot. The shadows are coming, the shadows come to stay. Dancing Shadows, I suppose, actually evokes that chapter with Daenerys when she tries to resurrect Drogo. She sees dancing shadows on the tent where Drogo is. Dancing shadows are a definite symbol of magic in this world. Dark magic, blood magic, the sort of shit Patchface is into. And so Shireen says, man, Patchface sings that song all the time, and I don't think it's catchy at all. I wouldn't put it on my summer party playlist, or not even my winter undersea Little Mermaid playlist. I don't enjoy that particular ditty. And Crescen's like, well, I don't know how to shut him up. He's your bloody fool. This is not under my purview. I've got a chain link for magic. I got a chain link for weather. I got a chain link for accounting. I never got a chain link on how to wrangle brain-damaged eldritch fools. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to make him stop singing that song. And then Shireen's like, well, you're fucking useless, aren't you? Well, no, Shireen's very polite. Shireen's nice and just sort of generally ineffectual. Wouldn't it be great if Shireen just went and, like, did something? She doesn't really do anything. I mean, to be fair, she's 9 years old and hasn't had a lot of opportunities to assert herself, I suppose. But wouldn't it be cool if Shireen did something? Like, what if she did, like, a classic Willow Manderley move? Remember when Willow Manderley was like, yo, this my boy Stark, man. I'm with the Starks. You can't fray up in my business. I'm done with your fray shit. Get in my pie. Remember when Willow Manderley said that? That was great. I would love to see Shireen do something similar. You know what Shireen could do? Imagine if Shireen could just, like, headbutt someone. Like, play to your strengths, right? Like, do you think that stony face causes a proportionate increase in face density? If Patchface just clonkered someone right in the clonk hole, could she could really have or maybe, like, the roughness, you could sort of grate at someone's face. Could Shireen's crackly stony face operate as, like, a cheese grater implement to sort of wear her enemies down? That's a bit graphic, isn't it? Well, look, I don't know. I'm just brainstorming. Yes, and me, Shireen. Yes, and me. Anyway. So Patchface also has some sick tattoos. So Patchface was originally from Volantis. He was a Volantine slave. And there he was a witty, clever lad who could sing in 4 different languages, and he was smart and bright and cool. And that's why Patchface was brought to Dragonstone by Stannis and Robert and Renly's father, Steffi. Took Patchface back to Westeros, and then Patchface was this cool hoopy frood, but the ship sank. It was broken on the appropriately named Shipbreaker Bay, and Stefan died. Steffi, R.I.P. Steffi, Stefarino in Ripperino in Pisarino, died. And that was a downer for Stannis, young Stannis. And that was the crash, the old Crash Bandicoot where Patchface got dunked into the drink and disappeared for 2 days and then came back. What was he doing for those 2 days? I ask. Suspicious absence. He came back looking corpsey, but then he woke up. What's going on? Was he having a conversation with the bloody drowned god? What kind of deal did they make? What kind of bargain did he make with that eldritch squid? I don't know, but it was probably something bad. 'Cause his flesh was clammy cold, but then he woke up. He seemed a corpse, but then he came back. We also have some thoughts about Stannis's personality. Stannis never learned to laugh. He was obviously a bit traumatized by the death of his father. He watched from the parapets as his father's ship was smashed against the rock. But we also learned later that Stannis was always in Robert's shadow, and he always felt a bit hard done by, and he was always serious and somber, and he grew up to be a very sort of hard, joyless man. And it's unfortunate, and Crescent feels bad about that Stannis never learned to be happy or to be nice to people, and that's one of the sort of failures that haunts Crescent throughout this chapter. And that's the wonderful thing about Game of Thrones. Characters are haunted by eldritch, squiddy, undead squid people with hats, and they are also haunted by fiery comets in the sky prophesying doom, but they are also haunted by personal failures and relationships in a very human way, and that's why Game of Thrones is a good book. All right. So, Stannis, he's a bloke. Did I talk about Patchface's sick tats? He's got sick tats, face tattoos. Alt Shrift also has face tattoos, for those who aren't aware. You know there's lore. You know there's a whole expanded Swifty cinematic universe. The squad will fill you in, I'm sure. But I got face tattoos. Not as cool as Patchface, though, actually. Patchface has a checkerboard tattooed onto his face of red and green motley, which is a hell of a tat, I would say. And so anyway, so Patchface seems kind of useless now. What with him just being gibbering and upset and talking weird shit. And so when he originally came back from the crash, they thought about putting him down, but Shireen liked him, and Cresson refused to kill him. And so that's why he's alive today. And Cresson isn't quite sure if he should be glad of his decision to let Patchface live. Whether Patchface had gotten any joy of his life since the crash, Cresson could not say. So he's a deeply mysterious individual. The shadows come to dance, my lord, Patchface says again. His classic hit, he replays. And then we learn that Sir Davos returned in the night. And that Sir Davos has been speaking with King Stannis, and Cresson is like, why wasn't I at that meeting? I'm the maester, I'm the advisor, I should have a voice at these sort of councils. But alas, Cresson was not invited to this particular soiree. And Cresson's a bit upset to be excluded. And then Cresson thinks, all right, well, I've got to go talk to Stannis now. If Davos is back, we've got news, I need to go talk to Stannis. And so he decides to go visit the king, but the king is on the other side of the castle, and castles, as it turns out, are not friendly places for the frail. Frail unfriendly is a castle, because there's all these stairs and there's all these bloody distance that you have to cross. Of course, you know, if castles were built in modern times, there would be mobility ramps, and there would be braille at every corridor, and there'd be handrails, and there'd be signage. But alas, such modern conveniences did not exist in these times. The Valyrians were quite inconsiderate. But we're back. We're back on the dragon tracks. And Cresson needs to cross the castle. It's a torment for him to walk the castle with his bad hip. He broke his hip some years ago, and it's never quite healed, and so he's not looking forward to the ordeal and the torment of crossing the castle to get there. But he begins with the help of Pylos. And there's an army outside. There's 3,000 blokes who have come to support King Stannis. He's called his banners, but 3,000 men is not very many in the grand scheme of things. He hasn't got enough blokes, which is the main political problem going on for Stannis at this point. And so he sees the boats, he sees the men, he crosses the castle, and Cresson meets Davos Seaworth on the staircase. Davos Seaworth, he's a slight man, the low birth is written plain upon his face, because this is the sort of universe where you can tell someone's socio-economic status by their face, which is a depressing reality of then and perhaps of now. And Davos has a green cloak, and he's salt-stained, and he has brown eyes and hair, and he has a little pouch of leather around his neck, which contains his fingers that were cut off. And he wears a leather glove on his maimed left hand. And Davos is like, yep, I just got back last night in the darkness, my favorite time, because of course Davos was once the most notorious and elusive smuggler in all the Seven Kingdoms, which come to think of it makes him Han Solo, right? Davos is the Han Solo of Game of Thrones. Well, admittedly, only in the most superficial sense, I suppose. Really, he's a smuggler, and he's a bit of an adventurer. But Davos is, I think, a more morally grounded man than Han. He's a family man with Maya and the kids. Davos is different to Han in a lot of ways. Maybe late Han. I don't really know what Han's late period, his blue period, was like. I haven't read the EU canon books when Gargalan Skywalker fights the Yusang Vong. Like, fuck that. I can't. Just end it. We've done enough Star Wars. Don't email me. But we've done enough Star Wars. It's time to write another story. Says the individual who's been studying Game of Thrones for... So, Davos Seaworth, top bloke, 8 out of 8, mate. And Davos is like, yep, it's me, it's Davos. And his concern is that he was sent off to go and rally men to support King Stannis. He was going to go talk to all of the... Hypergrip makes a very good point. If you are a famous smuggler, are you good at your job? Being well known seems like a career ender. Good point, Hypergrip. You'd think that being inconspicuous and anonymous is kind of on the job description of being a smuggler. You'd think so. But Davos was apparently infamous. Weird. I feel like that's retcon worthy as well. And so Davos is like, yeah, I failed in my mission to go and rally the houses for Stannis because people just don't like Stannis very much. He's just a bit cold and hard and uncharismatic, and he's just not really anyone's favorite, and so they're not rallying to support him. And Crescent thinks, yep, as ever, because Stannis has always been strong and able and just, but it's never been enough because he's just not very likable. He hasn't got star power. He hasn't got that flair. He hasn't got that spark, that finesse, mate. And so no one really likes Stannis, except for Crescent. He loves Stannis as the son he never had. And that love motivates Crescent's actions in this chapter. And so we get a description of some of the houses that Davos has been speaking with to try and bring them over to Stannis. The Tarths, Penrose, Swan, Dondarrion. Dondarrion isn't around at the moment because, of course, he's busy being a fire zombie as opposed to a squid damp zombie like Patchface. And a bunch of the houses have actually gone off and supported Renly. Renly, who now has a rainbow guard. Now, Renly is a man who understands branding. He understands good graphic design. He understands where to put your hat and where to put your pants. Renly knows how to present himself in a way to really get people excited. And part of that is that Renly has developed a Rainbow Guard. Because, of course, kings of Westeros have Kingsguard to defend their king. But Renly's like, you know what's boring about a bunch of... You know the one thing that's better than 7 men wearing white sworn to protect the king? I'll tell you. The one thing better is 7 men all wearing different colors sworn to protect the king. That is just definitionally better. How can it... It can't be worse, right? So Renly decides that his guard, because Renly is of course claiming to be the king right now, unjustly, given that he's the younger brother, a terrorist, the Beefish might say, and we get a description of the Rainbow Guard, and Crescent thinks about how Renly always loved bright colors and rich fabrics. He liked to play, he liked to dress up as a dragon, or a wizard, or a rain god, it says, which I think is odd. I think it's odd for a rain god to be included in the list of common dress-ups. Like, it's not really on the Halloween rack commonly, is it? Like, you dress up as the classic dragon, the classic wizard, rain god. I don't know what that look. How do you dress up like a rain god? You probably end up looking like Patchface. you just, all you need to dress up as a rain god is a bucket of water. Speaking of which, the best thing in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the many best things in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is the story of this one bloke who's been blessed, actually. He's been blessed by a rain god. And the manifestation of this blessing of this rain god is that this bloke, just this ordinary bloke who lives in England somewhere, is that there are constantly rain clouds following him that are constantly raining on him. It has been raining on this one bloke for his entire life, for years. And so I think he makes like a tidy profit by being paid to avoid certain places for events or like to irrigate the Sahara or something. But it's just adorable because this man is just so disgruntled and pissed off by this rain god blessing him with all this water. And you know, it's a blessing, it's a positive, beautiful thing, but what I think his name might be Rob McKenna, if I recall correctly. And he's just a bit upset about this unwanted, damp blessing. Anyway, so Crescent thinks about how Renly grew up into be, he's 21 years old now, which is very young, isn't it? You forget from watching this show. Renly in the books is only 21 years old, and he's got black hair and laughing eyes, and now he's dressing up like a king. He's playing at being a king in the way he used to play at being a rain god. And Crescent thinks that, oh man, that's not a great idea. What are you doing, Renly, you dear sweet child? Is there anyone who cares for him but me? And I dare say there are many others who care about Renly, Loras for one. But Crescent feels responsible for Renly, just as he feels responsible for Stannis, and he feels like his son, his quote unquote son Renly has been led astray, and he wishes he could bring him back to the right path. And so we have a description of the Siege of Storm's End, which was during Robert's rebellion. Tilly in Wonderland asks how old Stannis is. I believe he's 35. Someone fact check that, but I think Stannis is 35 in the books. So big gap between Renly and Stannis. I don't know why that is necessarily. But yeah, Stannis is a lot older than Renly and should honestly probably be in charge. But we have a description of the Siege of Storm's End, which was a siege during Robert's rebellion, when Storm's End was besieged by the Tullys and the Tyrells rather, and Stannis was inside starving for months. They'd eaten all the dogs and cats, and they were down to roots and rats, which honestly don't underestimate the culinary possibilities afforded by roots and rats. Actually, you know what this is? This is our mandatory food description. Every George R. R. Martin chapter has a food description in it somewhere. And here's the food description for Chapter 1 of A Clash of Kings. Succulent dogs roasting with dripping grease, and skinned cats skinned in 15 different ways, sautéed, braised, placed upon the high table. All these delicious horses with their hoofs filleted and placed. You know how you put a apple in a pig's mouth? You put a hoof in a horse's mouth. If that sounds morbid, well, it's morbid for the pig as well. All these different animals, so delicious in their own wonderful ways. But you know what really gets me juices flowing is a root and rat soup. Boil it out, chop it up, roast it, boil it, steam it, stick it in a stew, as Samwise Gamgee might say. Roots and rats are delicious. You heard it here first. Jamie Oliver. And so that was the storm of Siege's End. The end of Siege's storm. The storm of End's siege. It was a war. And it sucked because Stannis was really hungry, but he was rescued and his people were saved when Davos Seaworth, the galaxy's most infamous smuggler who swam the narrow sea in 15 parsecs, he came to the rescue, and he delivered a boatload of onions and saltfish to the siege and saved Stannis and his men. And so as reward for saving him, Stannis gave Davos lands and a keep and made him a knight, but he also cut off a bunch of Davos's fingers, what with the smuggling and whatnot. And Stannis wielded the knife himself, because like Ned Stark, the man who passes the sentence swings the butcher's cleaver. In this case, it's a butcher's cleaver, which doesn't roll off the tongue so well, and I bet it didn't roll off Davos's fingers either. Man, that was a bit of a semantic knot. But anyway, so that's Davos's origin story. That's the Siege of Storm's End. And what Stannis wants to do now is he wants to march on King's Landing with all of his military power to claim the Iron Throne that is rightfully his. After the death of Robert Baratheon, Stannis is the rightful heir to the Seven Kingdoms. Which is why it's bullshit that a blonde little incest monster like Joffrey is claiming it. But the problem for Stannis is that he doesn't have enough blokes. He doesn't have enough men to wage this war. And yet Stannis is too determined and too proud to fail to do his duty and to attack King's Landing. So that's the situation politically. And so we go up to where Stannis is. It's in a room called the Drum Tower, which is called that because it beats like a drum when storms rage and go boom, 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 and the drum sounds physically implausible to me, but also sounds pretty dope. The Drum Tower. Brian asks, how do you march across a bay? Good question, Brian. I imagine it involves getting your feet wet. Actually, you should ask Patchface. I'm sure Patchface would have some method for marching across a bay, and I expect it would look a lot like that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean when the spooky skeletals walk across the ocean floor. Good scene. Good movie. Not so sure about the sequels. Drum Tower sounds like an EDM festival, Rasheen suggests. That I think you're dead on the money there. Lots of glazed eyes at a Drum Tower festival. And so the painted table is in the Drum Tower, and it's this table that's shaped in the shape of Westeros. It's a map made by Aegon Targaryen. I think we all know that. Next page. Hairless Oyster points out that the painted table is nearly Olympic-sized pool-sized. And yes, again, because George Martin is a size queen, everything needs to be ridiculously large. Isn't there a point at which a map is so large that it stops being a map and starts being the thing that you're mapping? I mean, if you made a globe that was the size of the globe, what you'd have is the globe, right? And my point is that a map is useful to the extent that it is proportionally smaller than the real thing, right? So maybe the painted table should be pocket-sized. It wouldn't be a table. It would be like a doll's house table. The painted table should be a doll's house-sized table. But anyway, I'm not going to tell George Martin how to do his feng shui and interior design. And so Cresson speaks with Stannis, and Stannis complains that everyone's going off and supporting Renly instead of Stannis. Well, no, we should be introduced to Stannis first. So Stannis, Lord of Dragonstone, and the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, says hello to Cresson quite rudely. He says, "I knew you would come, old man, whether I summoned you or not." And there is no hint of warmth in his voice. So Stannis is kind of a cunt. I mean, he's a king. I suppose kings are meant to be entitled and rude, but he takes it a bit far, I think. And Stannis is not very nice to this man who's been looking after him all his life. And he's hard. Hard is how people describe Stannis. Yeah, he's not yet 35, so he's 34 years old at the start of book 2. And he's balding, and unlike his brother Robert, who had a great wild beard, Stannis keeps his whiskers tight and short and cropped, as if in answer. Stannis very consciously makes himself look opposite to Robert. His eyes look like open wounds, which is not really what does it for me personally. Open wounds, not so much. Frowns and scowls and sharply worded commands are what come naturally from Stannis' thin, pale lips, his clenched muscles. He has a mouth that has forgotten how to smile and has never known how to laugh, and he grinds his teeth and you can hear it half a castle away. So Stannis is a very joyless, cold, rigid person, and not a lot of fun at a party. And Cresson is old and sick, according to Stannis. Stannis does not mince words. He says that you're old and useless, mate. I don't want you around. But Cresson offers his counsel nonetheless. And the Storm Lords will not rise for me, Stannis complains. He's complaining that the Lords are supporting Renly instead, and he talks about how it's wrong because he's the rightful heir. He complains about how Stannis doesn't like being the Lord of Dragonstone. He never asked for Dragonstone. He wanted Storm's End, and Storm's End is like the natural seat of House Baratheon, and it's the one that has all the powerful lands around it. And that's the whole thing about Dragonstone, is that it's important because it's like this old Targaryen fortress and stuff, but it doesn't have lands around it. What with it being an island, that's usually how islands work. They don't have much land around them, girt by sea, not by land, is how islands work. And so as a result, there aren't many men on the lands around Dragonstone, and so Dragonstone politically can't muster as much of a military force, and that's part of the problem why Stannis can't go and claim his throne. And so Stannis complains about not having enough blokes, and it's an old grievance that Robert, when he became king, gave Dragonstone to Stannis instead of giving Storm's End to Stannis. And there's speculation on whether Robert might have actually intended that as like a compliment, because Dragonstone is like a seat of kings. It's like this important place. But Stannis would have preferred Storm's End, and he feels resentment against Robert for that. Stannis complains that Renly is like a child. Why did the gods inflict me with brothers? This sucks. And he complains about how Cressen's useless. Stannis really has a bit of a fucking mope this chapter, actually. He may not be very emotional, but he's certainly willing to list all his grievances in bullet-pointed, notated, detailed form, isn't he? And he complains that he's not the king, and he goes on about the shitty paltry allies that he has, the Celtigars, Valyrians, Bar Emmons, who are, by the way, the blokes who helped King Aegon take over Westeros not so long ago, but Aegon had dragons, and Stannis doesn't, unless you count the stone ones. Will they wake? I don't know. But anyway, and he also mentions Salador Saan, who has the best name in Game of Thrones, and Cressen says, well, you know what you should do? You need to make more friends. Mate, you need to be nicer to some people, try to get some mates in your crew so that you have more blokes and you can attack King's Landing. And Stannis is like, I'm not going to make allies with people. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to be mates with my brother because my brother is so annoying. I'm the rightful king, so I'm not going to make friends with Renly. And so Cressen reflects that Stannis is stubborn and proud and doesn't change his mind. But Cressen's like, look, you can make other mates. Robb Stark, the king in the north, you could ally with him. And Stannis is like, well, he's a false king. I'm the real king. He should be subject to me. Am I to accept a broken realm? And so one of the other sort of compromises of this chapter, and sort of Davos' story as well, I think, is compromise and dealing with like moral halves, half measures. Like, yeah, it is not strictly according to the book to deal with King Robb, seeing as he's divvying up the kingdom, which should be united under one king. But the reality that we learn from Game of Thrones is that sometimes you need to compromise to get stuff done in politics and in life. But Stannis doesn't want to compromise. He says, I don't want to fucking do any of that. I want everyone to recognize that I'm the king. Stannis goes on another tirade about how Eddard Stark, I don't like Eddard Stark because Robert loved Eddard Stark, and he loved him like a brother, even though I was Robert's real brother, and Robert should have liked me, and and he never appreciated me, and he didn't name me Hand of the King. And Cressen's like, look, don't worry, man, the past is dust. Let's look at the future. What about if we hang out with Lady Arryn? Lysa Arryn, she's known to be a really stable, reliable, nice, positive person. How about we make friends with Lady Arryn? She's not a fan of the Lannisters, what with the death of Jon Arryn, which was done by the Lannisters, except we know that it's not done by the Lannisters. It was done by Peter Baelish, but whatever. It was done by Lysa on behalf of Peter Baelish, but let's stop whispering. And so Cressen's like, make friends with Lady Arryn. And Stannis is like, nah, I don't want to deal with the Arryns. The Arryn heir is little sweet Robin, and he's gross and epileptic. And Cressen's like, well, you got to compromise, man. You got to be realistic. And then Selyse, the voice of Selyse, comes from outside and says, compromise? I think that's silly, says Selyse. And Cressen turns and sees Selyse. And Selyse is Stannis' wife. And Selyse is as tall as her husband, thin of body, thin of face, prominent ears, and the faintest hint of a moustache on her upper lip. She plucks it daily and curses it regularly, but it always comes back. Do you think there's ever been a society where female moustaches were valued as a feminine beauty trait? They have changed, haven't they? Like you see, dick size is a good one. Like the Greeks liked small dicks. apparently. You see on all the statues, they've got all these little... They look like Davos's fingers, actually. Davos's shorn fingers between the legs of David and all of those old statues and stuff. Apparently the Greeks thought that large penises were unsightly and comical and silly. But now, unless you've got like a pastrami... Is a pastrami a sausage? It's not, is it? What's the term for like a big old pepperoni meatloaf? Well, one of those is what's now considered the male masculine ideal. And so the point is that beauty ideals change. And maybe one day a great, thick, bushy moustache on a feminine face, maybe in a more enlightened society, that would be considered beautiful. But alas, that's not the case in Westeros. Salami. Why did I reach for salami and grab pastrami? Is pastrami even a word? I don't know. Salami, yes, thank you. Or a cheese wheel. I don't know what a cheese wheel phallus would look like, but alright, anyway. Especially not a Swiss one. Anyway, so that's Selyse, and Selyse is, Selyse is trying to make the best of a bad situation. She's in a loveless marriage. She's on a shitty, gross island. And the thing that Selyse is clinging to at the moment is the religion of R'hllor, advanced by Melisandre, who we will meet soon. Because Selyse has converted to the religion of the Lord of Light under the guidance of Melisandre. And Stannis is like, gods, what do I need with gods? I need swords, and men carrying swords, and men carrying swords, sticking those swords into men who carry swords who aren't my men with swords. That's what I need, damn it. And there's no affection in his tone. Stannis has always been uncomfortable around women. He's not close with Selyse. He's only gone to the marriage bed once or twice a year. He took no joy in sex, and he never fathered any sons. Is Stannis asexual? I mean, Todd in BoJack Horseman is asexual, so now we're allowed to talk about that now, I think. Is Stannis asexual? He takes no joy in sex. He hoped for sons, but he only went to the marriage bed once or twice a year. Maybe he just doesn't like moustaches. I don't know. Maybe he's gay and repressed, like Renly, or something. I don't know. Stannis' sexuality is a mystery we may never untangle. And Selyse is like, nah, it's gonna be great. We got House Florent, my house. House Florent is gonna be a good time. So Rachel Wheatman asks, does Stannis enjoy sex with Melisandre? That's a good point. Maybe Stannis is into sex, just only with fire priestesses. That's a very specific kink. But yeah, maybe that's the case. The show certainly represents Stannis as enjoying sex with Melisandre. I don't recall if Stannis enjoys in the books, but I don't know. We'll keep that in mind in future episodes. Alright, so Stannis is like, yeah, but your family's a bit shit. They've only got like 2,000 swordsmen. It is said that Stannis knew the strength of every house in the Seven Kingdoms. Is Stannis a bit Asperger's-y? Is that part of his thing? He does seem to be very, very knowledgeable about certain specific subjects, and he seems to be very sort of orderly and specific about how he wants things and not very good at socialization. Is he a bit of a Spurgaloid? I don't know. Maybe. We'll try and psychoanalyze Stannis as we go through the story. But we have a description of the comet. It's red of flame for the fiery heart of R'hllor. Selyse is very excited about this comet. And Selyse says that the meaning of this comet is that your time has come and you're going to conquer and you're going to get the throne and it's going to be fantastic. Nothing is more certain, says Selyse, because faith, as it turns out, is a hell of a drug. My God, faith. This is your face on faith. Remember all of those awful like 80s don't do drugs kids ads with like the terrible acting from the teenagers going like, hey, do you want to inject a marijuana? And they're like, don't do that or you'll crash your motorbike into your grandma. They should do one of those for faith. That's mean. I feel like are we being mean? What? All right. So, how many swords will the Lord of Light put into my hand? Stannis asks again. So, Stannis is very material. He wants material results. He's not interested in the fucking spiritual, the phantasmagorical. Stannis cares about the things that he can touch and see, like crowns and swords and thrones. And Solis says, well, yeah, all right. So, it is a bit of a problem that Renly exists, because Renly is claiming a bunch of the men who should be fighting for you to help you get the throne. But maybe if Renly died, that would be helpful. If Renly died, that would solve some problems for us. And then Crescent is like, what is you doing? That's fratricide, mate. There are rules about these things. You can't kill your brother. I mean, of course, as a High Lord, you can kill pretty much whoever you please if they're poor and ugly, but your brother? That's wrong. I do love the whole sort of like feudal morality of like, guess right. If someone eats your bread, you can never kill them or you'll be cursed forever. But if there's a washerwoman who offends you because she's got a mole on her forehead, you can hang her and it's fine. If you're like Randall Tarley. All right, yeah, admittedly, all right, there is some like system of quote-unquote justice. There has to be some offense, usually, if you play it by the book. But still, it seems a bit bullshit the way this system of morality works in Westeros. But anyway, killing your brother? It's evil, unthinkable, Crescent says. And Stannis is like, killing your brother. Not a bad idea. I think I'll think on that one. And then he says, Crescent, you're dismissed. And then Crescent is like, well, fuck. And Crescent leaves. He limps back to the balcony to stare out at the sea. And Crescent thinks, man, this is so fucked up. I'm so unhappy with this situation. Had I lived so long for this? So Crescent's really thinking about, what does my life mean? Given how fucked up everything is right now. And Crescent thinks about how he feels like a father to Robert, Stannis, and Renly, because of course Steffi Baratheon died in that car crash, in that ship sinkage. There's a term for that, the shipwreck. And so Crescent sort of feels like he raised the three sons, Robert, Stannis, and Renly. But he feels like, have I been such a bad surrogate father that I'm now watching Stannis and Renly kill each other? Crescent is horrified by the prospect of his sons attacking each other, his quote-unquote sons. And so you know what he thinks? He thinks, all right, you know what the real problem here? You know what the real problem is here with these, bad, cold, dysfunctional relationships, with his political situation, with this whole sort of psychosocial situation that's led to this point? You know what? You know what the problem is? The problem is the woman. It's the bloody woman. It's the bloody woman every time. The woman is the heart of it. The Red Woman. Melisandre. She's the bloody problem. Pin it on the woman. She's a witch. Blame the witch. Burn the witch. It's all their fault. Let's not think about how our decisions and relationships might have been. All right, we're proselytizing now. Melisandre of Ashai, sorceress, shadowbinder, priestess to R'hllor, lord of light, god of flame, heart of fire. Melisandre. She's got quite a business card. She's got quite a bloody list of titles. She almost rivals Daenerys and Tormund when she gets really verbose about it. And so Melisandre is the problem, Crescent thinks. And so he decides, you know what I'll do? I'll poison the witch. It'll be great. I mean, traditionally you burn a witch, but I guess it would feel thematically inappropriate to burn Melisandre, wouldn't it? What do you think would happen if someone tried to burn Melisandre? It'd be like trying to burn fucking TNT. It wouldn't do well. And so he goes through some jars and he takes out a poison, a dozen little crystals, indigo crystals, purple crystals rather. And we get another food description. Well, it's sort of a recipe book. We get a very distinct recipe on how to make this particular poison, the Strangler. It's made from a certain plant that only grows on a certain island. You have to soak it in lime and sugar water. Delicious. And certain rare spices. Thicken it with ash. Allow it to crystallize. A whole bloody complex recipe to make a single plumbus. A Strangler crystal poison. It's a poison called the Strangler. The faceless men of Bravos know how to make it. Name drop, And Cressen's going to use this poison because the men who know how to heal also know how to kill. So remember that next time you see your GP, which you should do regularly. See your GP, floss. Normally, it's Hairless Oyster always has some great health tips. You should listen to him as well for great health tips. The Strangler, which I think was used to kill Joffrey. Was it Joffrey who was killed by the Strangler at his wedding? Possibly. So Cressen has this poison the Strangler, and he wants to poison Melisandre because if he poisons the witch, that will solve all the problems. And Cressen thinks that, well, it's a terrible thing to poison someone, but it must be done. Which is interesting because it's the same sort of reasoning behind, say, Stannis killing Renly, terrible thing that must be done, right? So it sort of plays on that sort of concept of compromising and moral black and white that plays through this chapter. And he thinks, well, I'm not going to poison a woman, I'm not going to poison a witch on an empty stomach, or, well, rather, I'm going to have a nap. I'm going to have a good old nap that I'm going to wake up and poison a witch. And so he goes and has a sleep while brooding on the comet, the omen of blood. And he decides that the omen of blood, the comet, is foretelling murder. The comet is on his side, he decides. So ironically, despite talking smack about prophecy before, he's like, you know what, the omen is support of me, which is what everyone thinks in this book. It's great at the start of A Clash of Kings how we get to see how every different character decides that this magical event, it's about me. The universe is centered around me. We live in a Cressenocentric universe, and the comet is for me. This is my hole. It was made for me. Go look that up. And so Cressen wakes up, and then he realizes, hold on a minute, it's like straight up nighttime. I slept too late for the feast. They did not summon me. He was not invited. He didn't get the Facebook friend request. He didn't get to go to the party. Cressen was not summoned to the feast. And so he thinks about how Stannis has been standing cold in the shadows while the sun set on his elder brother, and he thinks about his poor boy Stannis. He's so very affectionate to this Stannis, who is utterly rejecting all his affections, tragically. And so he finds his poison, and he puts it in his poison pocket. He doesn't have a poison pocket protector, sadly. But anyway, so he's like, Pylos, help me come to the feast. But Pylos isn't around, which is odd. And so Cressen is confused, but he gets the servants to help him. And so he's confused that no one woke him up to take him to the feast because it's important for him to be at the feast. And a night wind whispers, and we've got this ominous imagery. Christ, this chapter is long. And the comet is blazing red, and Cressen, you know what Cressen's feeling. Cressen's feeling a little bit spooked, I would say. He's there's a Jiminy in his bloody cricket. Cressen's scared. And I do like the symmetry, actually, of the prologue of book 1 being about fear of the icy darkness, whereas this chapter is about fear of fire. This is a fiery spookery, as opposed to the icy spookage that we see in book 1. It's almost as though this is some kind of song of ice and fire. 55 Beulah says, Melisandre should tell us what the Strangler tastes like, which is a great point. So what's about to happen is that Melisandre is about to drink some of the Strangler poison and survive. Spoiler. But she could say what it tastes like, which would be cool. Because isn't there this whole thing of like super deadly poisons? No one knows what they taste like because when you taste it, you die. I mean, some poisons act slowly, so there isn't that problem. But some poisons act super fast. So you can't. No one can tell what it tastes like. And apparently there have been experiments. I might be making these up. There have been experiments where people have been given super deadly poisons with like a chart next to them so that they can like point to, this is what it tastes like at the moment of death. Just because, that's what science is. We've got to know the unknowable and we've got to taste the untastable. Know the unknowable, taste the untastable. That is the motto of NASA. Do you ever sit up at night thinking like, what does like asteroids taste like? Like, what does Venus taste like? What's like I feel like there should be more taste testing in the space exploration efforts, is all I'm trying to say. And so Crescent walks up to the feast, and he's trying to be brave, and he's trying to poison the witch, and he walks into the dragon's maw, because the great feast room place is shaped like a dragon, like lots of the rooms in Dragonstone, and it's shaped like a dragon's maw. He walks into the dragon's mouth. Fiery, scary place. Ominous. And so the feast is pretty quiet. There's a low mutter of table talk, because Stannis doesn't permit feasts to have loud laughter or shouting, which, man, that's just fucking sad. That's a real rain on everyone's parade, is Stannis. Stannis doesn't permit people to have fun, which is not a very good way to make friends, Stannis. If you want to learn about branding from Renly, you could start by allowing people to laugh loudly. But anyway, so everyone... Oh, we got more food description. We got multiple food descriptions in this chapter. We have black bread soaking in fish stew, which I'm pretty sure is a euphemism, and we've got all sorts of eating going on, and Patchface is singing that bloody awful song about the shadows coming to stay. And this is Crescent walking into the Thunderdome, and this is Crescent's moment to stand up for himself and to stand up for his love, Stannis, and to protect what's right and set things straight and kill the bloody witch. Oh yeah, that is a autistic thing as well, isn't it? Loud noises being distracted for people. We don't want to like quasi-psychologize, but it does seem as though Stannis ticks certain boxes in the diagnosis for something Asperger's-y, maybe. Cardinal Doomsday suggests that Stannis is kind of like Snape. Yeah, maybe. I reckon Snape's on some kind of bloody spectrum, but Snape is a. We should do a video about Snape. Anyway, because it is confusing about like his whole motivations and everything. Anyway, and so he walks into the Thunderdome, and Patchface is dancing, and Crescent tries to walk past Patchface, but Patchface crashes into Crescent, knocks into him, and then everyone laughs at Crescent. Which is fucking tragic, because Crescent's trying to be dignified and trying to hold on to a shred of pride, but Patchface comes smashing into him, and it looks funny, and everyone makes fun of him. And Patchface, of course, being a limber corpse boy, he just jumps up and does a little dance, because that's what Patchface does. But Crescent has a broken hip, and he's a bit upset. Well, the hip was broken. And so he sort of gets up awkwardly. Well, he's helped up by a certain individual. Some strong man comes and picks up Crescent, and then Crescent starts saying, "Oh, thank you, sir," to the person who picks him up. But then Crescent realizes that the person who's picking him up is not a knight. It's Lady Melisandre. It's the Red Witch. It's the enemy that he's intending to poison, which is like, oh, shit. That's like when you're taking a day off work. You're like pretending to be sick, and you call up and you say, "Mr. Borridge of the nail factory, I'm so sick, I can't make any nails today. I'll have to take a sick day." And then you actually go with your mate Ferris to the mall to go and dance with a didgeridoo. And then when you're doing that, you bump into Mr. Borridge from the nail factory, and you're like, oh shit, oh lord, my lie is caught out, my dark intentions revealed. Well, except Crescent's intentions aren't revealed just yet, so just ignore that metaphor. Jim in the chat says, did Patchface replace the poison vial from Crescent? Did Patchface do a little bit of a switcheroo? And did he, like, steal the real poison away from Crescent and maybe replace it with some fake poison? And maybe that's why Melisandre survived. Cool idea. But, as we'll soon see, Melisandre may survive, but Crescent doesn't. Crescent does get poisoned for realsies. So it does seem as though Melisandre really legitimately does have some kind of magic that protects her from the poison. William Wang super chats and asks, will Alt-Shift-X do a video on Patchface? I can't speak for what Alt-Shift-X does. I only recently escaped from his dungeon, so I wouldn't know his plans. But I do know that the Alt-Shift-X Patreon has been doing votes for video topics, and that Patchface has been almost winning several times. Patchface has almost been the chosen topic, and I think it's likely that Patchface will have an Alt-Shift-X video soon-ish, depending on what the patrons ask for. But thank you for the donation, William. And again, I would emphasize that I have no idea what kind of arcane plans Alt Shift X has. I'm Alt Shift X, and I'm reading about Lady Melisandre. She's bright as fire, red head to heel, with darker blood-red fabric underneath the red silks. Around her throat she has a red gold choker, tighter than any maester's chain, ornamented with a single great ruby, which we find out in the show is somehow related to her being secretly old. Which, by the way, was a bit weird in the show, how they're just like, hey, Melisandre's really old under her ruby thing. And everyone's like, wow, what does that mean? And then the show said, I don't know. And then the viewers are like, why did you tell us something if it's not going to mean anything? And the show's like, we ran out of books. That's sort of what I got from that. But yes, Kata, I'm sure Juan will set things straight. Okay, so Melisandre is an imposing, mystical, impressive figure. She's beautiful and terrible and red with a heart-shaped face. There's someone else with a heart-shaped face. I think Shiera Seastar has a heart-shaped face, and so everyone thinks that Melisandre equals Shiera Seastar, equals Benjen, equals Dario, equals Macumba. And Melisandre is red and terrible and red, which is a great description. And the night is dark and full of terrors, says Melisandre, because everyone needs a catchphrase, and Melisandre's is that spooky spooks out in the Babadook. And Crescent says, well, it makes no matter that she has her religious catchphrase because I have a faith of my own, by which I think he's referring to his belief in the secular academia of the faith of the Citadel, or rather the Maesters of the Citadel, but it is compared here to a faith. He calls it a faith, but what it is this is a battle between the supernatural of Melisandre and the opposite ideology of the Maesters. Faith versus physics, as the inimitable LP might say. And so that's the conflict that's set up for this scene. The shadows come to dance, my lord, dance, my lord, dance, my lord, says Patchface, and things only get creepier. And Melisandre says, oh, well, isn't this strange? The fool is clever with his talk of shadows, and yet the wise man, Crescent, is foolish. And Melisandre picks up Patchface's helm, the tin hat with bells, and puts it on Crescent's head, a crown to match your chain, Lord Maester. So Melisandre savagely mocks Patchface by putting this hat on his head and making fun of him, which is a really just painfully cruel thing to do to an old, dignified man who's just trying to get his shit together before he dies. It's impossible not to feel sympathy for Crescent in this moment. But Crescent, as his defense to try and cling on to dignity, he retreats to his ideology as a maester of the Citadel, and he says, I need no crown but truth. And so he's trying to defend himself with these ideals as a maester. And then Melisandre says, oh, there are more truths in this heaven and earth than exist in your philosophy, Horatio. And then Mel's like, magic's real, yo, is what she's trying to say. And then Crescent looks to see where his seat is, to sit at the feast, and then he realizes that Pylos is sitting in his place, not in his face. Where there is no face sitting in this chapter. It is Pylos sitting in Crescent's place at the table. And that's so upsetting to Crescent that he can't even comprehend what it means at first. But then he realizes that Pylos is replacing Crescent. Crescent is officially deemed so old and so useless that he's just being rejected, and now Pylos is the new Maester of Dragonstone, and he's sitting in Crescent's seat. And Crescent is really, really deeply shaken and upset and defeated by that. But he looks at some of the men sitting at the table, all of the lords that have gathered for Stannis, Lord Celtigar, who's aged and sour, crabby, you could say, Lord Celtigar is, handsome Lord Valerion, Lord Bar Emin, a plump boy of 14, Sir Axel Florent, pious Lord Sunglass, and only Sir Davos meets his gaze. Sir Davos is the only person nice enough and decent enough to give the barest minimum of respect to this old man who was served so loyally for so many years. And so Stannis says, "You're too old and useless to hang out with me anymore. Go away." Yeah, this is the Mean Girls treatment, Rasheen. This is indeed. This is the classic cafeteria situation. Can I drink my milk box with you, cool kids? No, you're too old and learned. Go away. That's what's happening here. And then Crescent is rejected publicly, outwardly by Stannis. And Crescent is just absolutely gut punched by that. And he thinks, Stannis, my lord, my sad sullen boy, son I never had, don't do this to me. I lived for you. I loved you despite all. I loved you more than anyone. Please, don't be so mean to me. And then Davos is the hero, and Davos stands up and says, I would be honored if Crescent would sit by me. So Davos is the one man in the room who's decent enough to look after Crescent, and of course that's sort of Davos's gimmick, isn't it? That Davos is sort of the one good bloke when he is of course a common man. It's written on his face that Davos is a common man. He's lowborn, and yet Davos is more honorable and decent than these supposed lords. So Davos invites Crescent to sit next to him. And he does, and Solis is there, flashing a bright and brittle smile. And Crescent walks up to the table, and he's thinking, how can I get the poison into Melisandre's cup? And Patchface is thinking. Patchface is talking about under the sea, the fish eat us. Here we eat fish, under the sea the fish eat us, which is of course an obscure reference to Star Wars Attack of the Clones. Remember that one bit when the big fish eats the little fish, and then a bigger fish eats the big fish, and it's like, wow, there's some big fishes in the water. Do you remember that? That was the one good bit about the prequels. I'm not even gonna, because it's so stale to complain about the prequels. Red Letter Media, I mean, it's everyone knows it, but if by some bizarre chance you haven't, go and watch Red Letter Media's review of the Phantom Menace. It's a verified classic of video essays, YouTube. Beautiful. But you've probably already seen it. And so Davos says to Crescent, man, Patchface is probably right. We're about to see what Patchface saw. I fear we're going to see the bottom of the sea because Stannis seems determined to march on King's Landing. All right, sail, fine. He doesn't march across the sea, but Stannis wants to attack King's Landing even though we haven't got enough blokes because Melisandre is convincing him to do so. And then Crescent's like, nah, it's going to be fine. Going to poison him. Going to be sick. Great. Don't worry. No wuckers, mate, buddy, guy. And then Solis says, Crescent is like, we need a compromise with the Starks and the Arryns, and Stannis is like, I don't compromise with anyone, no more than the light makes common cause with darkness, Lady Solis says. So the R'hlloric Lord of Light religion is often compared to Zoroastrianism because it's got like a dualistic light-dark thing going on. And Melisandre sort of talks about how, a half-rotted onion is a rotten onion. So it seems that the Lord of Light, or at least Melisandre, has a very black and white, good versus evil morality, and she doesn't believe in compromise or grey. We talk about the politics a bit, and Solis is like, man, we don't need to worry about politics because we've got God on our side, like the Blues Brothers. We cannot fail. And Crescent says gods make uncertain allies at best. And that one, the Lord of Light, has no power here. And I love the localization of gods. That's something that's sort of stopped. It used to be that a god lived in a place. A god was tied to a space that it had domain over. It was like tied to like nature, and that's how a god exerted itself, was within a certain place. But then all these like monotheistic gods turn up and were like, yo, you know what our house is? The entire universe. The whole world is what is under my domain, all these monotheistic gods claimed. And then funnily enough, it was those gods who inspired everyone to go running off on global crusades and jihads and things, were all these monotheistic gods who were very greedy and high and mighty, but that's what we've sort of ended up with. There's some good books on that shit. But anyway, so Cressen's like, fuck gods, and then Melisandre and Selyse are like, gods are great, and then Selyse commands Patchface to put his helmet on the head of Cressen, and Stannis says, yep, Selyse commanded it, put the helmet on Cressen. So this is just really depressing. Stannis is not only being like cold and rude, he's actively participating in the mockery of Maester Cressen, the man who considers himself his father and the man who's worked so hard for years to look after him, and God, it's just so sad and bad. And Cressen is thinking, I will serve you to the last, my sweet lord, my poor lonely son, for suddenly he saw the way. So Cressen, in an attempt to poison Melisandre, puts the poison, he deftly sneaks the poison into his own wine cup, and then he says, I need to be smooth, I need to be quick, I need to finesse this, I am one with the force is with me, I must not fumble, smooth motions, deft, if he was Arya, he would say, quick as a fox and sly as a river, or whatever the fuck Arya says, and then he raises the poisoned cup and he says, Lady Melisandre, will you share a cup of wine with me? A cup to toast the power of the Red God. And Melisandre's like, all right, I'll have a go at the old grape juice. And so everyone's watching and they stand up, and Cressen's thinking, look, this is something that has to be done for the sake of the realm, the soul of my lord. So Cressen is absolutely thinking about his legacy, about setting things straight. It's going to be okay. He can die happy if he can just kill Melisandre, and that'll fix everything, is what Cressen's thinking. And then when they stand close to one another, Melisandre says quietly that it is not too late to spill the wine, Maester. So Melisandre like totally knows that Cressen's trying to poison her, but she's like, all right, we can play your game. And so Melisandre drinks from the poisoned cup long and deep, and then she leaves just a little bit of the wine left, and she says, and now it's your turn. And then Cressen's like, well, all right, I can't not drink it, or everyone will know that it's poison. Although when you think about it, isn't there literally no reason for him to drink I mean, it's because he's... Alright, the point is, Cressen is willingly dying here, because Cressen has already got the poison into Melisandre. Cressen totally could just throw away the rest of the poisoned wine and walk away. Like, what are they going to do to him? Like, he could just choose not to drink the poison here. He's already accomplished his goal of poisoning Mel, but he chooses to drink the poison. So Cressen is choosing to end his own life on what he thinks is a high point. He thinks that he's achieved his goal, and he can go out happy because he saved the day by killing Melisandre. But, spoiler, Melisandre doesn't die. Cressen dies. His throat starts to constrict, and he starts to die as the strangler chokes the life from him. But Melisandre stands perfectly healthy and well, despite the poison in her belly. And Mel says, R'hllor does have power here, and fire cleanses, and the ruby at her throat glows redly, and the magic of the Red God protects her from the poison. But Cressen dies on the ground, and he sinks to his knees, denying her power, as Patchface sings "Fool, fool, fool," and the last thing Cressen sees is the fire dancing in Melisandre's red eyes. Shit. What a chapter. What a bloody God, this was a long episode. Oh my Christ. Game of Thrones Prologue, A Clash of Kings, ACOK, Abridged, Gesundheit, Abridged. That's what we've just done. Man, I think it was a cool chapter. Because we've had this ideological battle between like magic and the secularism of the maesters. We've had magic win again, just like how the prologue of the first book ended with the victory of ice dark magic as opposed to fiery magic. In that ice and fire thing. And we've got a lot of legacies going on. Cressen thinking about his life and what it means in regards to his relationships with Robert and with Stannis and with Renly and all those guys. And we've got the political situation of Stannis shaping up against Renly, going up against King's Landing and the Lannisters, which is, of course, the whole sort of war of this clash of titular kings. And, of course, we have Patchface, who is as creepy as ever. Top form. He is just smashing out hit after hit. Yeah, chuck him up on Spotify if you want to hear some of his dark songs. Man, so thank you for participating in this stream. It is lovely to see you all. Rega, Adverb, Haddis, Thomas, Florbs, Project 70, everybody, can't list you all. Yeah, I had a good time. We're not going to be like regular with these episodes. I'm not going to make promises, but I think every now and then we're going to chuck out a chapter of Abridged. And I think that the next chapter is a lot shorter than this one, so that'll be more easy to tackle. So yeah, Shrift is escaped from Shift's closet. We're out of the closet, and we're doing these again sometimes. We won't do the Bandcamp thing this time. Last book we uploaded episodes to Bandcamp, but I don't know, it's kind of fiddly, and I think a lot of people don't like Bandcamp. So open to suggestions if you have other ideas about how you want this to be distributed. I suppose we could put it out as a podcast, maybe. If that's super exciting to you, let us know. If you've got any suggestions or ideas or thoughts about how you'd like this to run, chuck it in a comment. But otherwise, go and have a lovely week. And cheers.